Hello everyone, welcome on in. It's a new week here on the Betting Weekly Dojo. I'm Nigel Seeley, your host, and joining me, as per usual, on a Monday or Tuesday morning, it is my co-host, Neil Channing, professional gambler. Good morning, Neil.
Morning, nice to see you.
I know, very nice to see you. You're down in the same house for the next 3 weeks. It's very, very unusual to see you 3 weeks on the spin at exactly the same house. So nice to see you.
Yeah, it would be in. I think
And
next time I see you, we may have moved. I don't know, maybe in a couple of weeks' time.
Well, I mean, moves a lot there, Neil does. And people have commented about the clock. The clock, and it's always the same time, but it's the time we record. So it's not like it's not stuck on that particular time. It's always the time that we actually record here. How's your week been? Any good?
No, not really. No, not a great week. The election was a bit annoying in the end. I gave you that selection on the Donald Trump electoral college votes, and he just needed to lose one of the 7 swing states for us to win that bet. I think we bet it at plus 275. In running, it shortened up to plus 150 for quite a while. I think it might have been plus 120 actually. And I was feeling quite good about it, and then he just won by a little bit too much, unfortunately. So it was a bit annoying, actually. I felt like I got a lot right. I think you'll remember I said going into the election I wanted to try and green up, but I actually went in being with Trump, and then proceeded to get out in running, and so I made a profit on who would be the president. But I lost it back on who would win the popular vote and the bands of the electoral college votes. They're still counting though. They're still counting some of the votes. So who knows? Maybe it'll turn around. I don't think they've got many more to count. But it was a great betting election. You know, it wasn't one of the all-time greats. I like it when they swing back and forward and people struggle to cope with the changes in the prices and aren't really sure which way to go. It was a bit too one-sided, and that doesn't make for a good trading opportunity, sadly.
No, the trading was done, as you said. The event started in the months before, and obviously the night itself was a little bit of a disappointment. It was very, very easy victory for Donald Trump, which made the betting quite quiet, quite boring, quite dull, really. But that was the election, and that was what's happened. The more important thing, the big election over here, is the dancing. I mean, we speak about this every week. People have said to me, we don't want to come on here about Neil's dancing, but I do, because Neil's on the favourite, Chris McCausland. He's had a couple of bad weeks, but I think the judges' reaction to his win at the show at the weekend, his stance at the weekend, I think you've collected now. You've collected, mate. It's in the bag.
I mean, I'll quickly say, because I did notice a couple of people commenting. And one thing I hate, I listen to a lot of podcasts about gambling, and I hate it when people talk about bets that they've had at prices that are no longer available. And I do appreciate that some people listening to this can't bet on Strictly Come Dancing. If you're in the States or something, you think of it as Dancing with the Stars. And it's a completely different thing, but it's not completely different. It's pretty much the same, but different celebrities. But I would say that, I'm trying to get across points to think about in your gambling to make you a better gambler. And one thing I would say is that's a really important concept that a lot of people struggle with is when you approach something that's happening in running, you should stop thinking about what the prices were before and what prices you could have had. I mean, for example, with Chris McCausland, we could have had 16-1 if we'd have had a bet before the program started, before week 1. I wasn't even aware he was in it then. I don't really follow it that carefully.
I told you, I've bet him at 16. I've bet him at 16-1.
Yeah, well, you're too good.
Only for £10, because I bet him and the guy from JLS I thought because he could go one way or the other, being blind. He could become, the last person who had a disability on it who won it was the deaf girl who won it. She won it, and I thought the first person being blind, he could either be an absolute good thing or it could go bad. He said it was one of those ones where it was either going to go really well for you, or it was going to be out on week 2. So I did take a small bet, but literally tenner.
Well, I didn't get involved until the biggest price I got was plus 130. Most of my money went on at around about even money, but then I've pressed again at minus $1.50 and minus 200, and this is an important concept because I think people need to know when you're looking at an event in running, it doesn't matter what you've done before. It doesn't matter what the prices were before. It's a new event. When you look at it now, and Chris McCausland now is trading at about minus 225. Personally, I watched the show on Saturday and I thought, that's it, he's won. He would need to get an injury to not win this. Listening to the comments of the judges, one of the judges said, that you're breaking through in a way that other people have never done. People are coming up to me in the street and asking me about you, which has never really happened in the time I've been on the show. Two of the other judges said, we've worked on Dancing with the Stars, and also the program in Australia. And this is just a different feel to anything we've seen in any of those shows. And the way that they said it just made me think that they must be seeing the voting data coming through, and they must know that he's absolutely smashing it. And there were a few worries because last week and the week before, 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago, he didn't have great dances, and he wasn't in the bottom two with the judges, but he was not in the top 3 or 4. But you have to remember, none of that matters. The show is the winner of the show is decided on the voting public at home ringing in, and the voting public at home, there's a kind of a tricky balance in this program. Do we say, well, he may not be the best dancer, but we have to factor in the fact that he's blind, and he was blind in his 20s. He's never really seen a foxtrot or anything like that. Strictly Come Dancing didn't exist when he went blind. So do we factor that in, or do we just assume that he's the same as everyone else and focus on that? Now, the judges in the studio are doing the latter, but the people at home that are voting in clearly aren't going to do that. They're just going to say, oh my God, what a story, what a great guy. I think he's an absolute certainty, Nigel. I honestly, I think the price now should be minus 500. I've gone in again this morning at minus 225. If you haven't had a bet yet, if you're sick of listening to me talking about it week after week, I'm telling you now, if you haven't played yet and you're thinking, why does he keep banging on about it? It's all right for him. He's got even money. I don't want to take the minus 225. Take the minus 225 now. He should be minus 500. That's what I'm telling you.
I totally agree with you. I think he should be minus 500. One thing I've got to tell you, Neil, I know we're two dinosaurs in the betting industry, but not many people ring in anymore to these votes. There's things called apps, and there's things called the internet where they broadcast their votes. Nobody rings in anymore. Nobody picks up the phone and rings in anymore. It doesn't happen.
What I would say on that about being two dinosaurs is these things are really good for old people like us to bet on because there's no algorithm working out the pricing on this. Excuse me. Nobody is using, quantitative data and stuff like that. This is a look at the price and say whether it's right or wrong thing. And that's where old codgers like us have a big advantage over the new whippersnappers dominating professional sports gambling these days.
For now. For now, give it a couple of years. I'm sure there'll be some smart Alec who's built some system that will say exactly. But I do agree. Minus $4, minus $5 would be my price. I thought the show, the comments, and also the comments from the judges. Before we part this one away, the judges turned around and said they've never seen anything like this in their life. What he's doing, and when it went black and he stood on the thing and he spun the girl around was just amazing. So if you haven't seen it in American, Google it. Go onto YouTube, put in Chris McCausland's dance and Strictly Come Dancing last Saturday, and you'll see what me and Neil are on about. Okay, the subject we are going to talk about this week is a subject. It's a bit of a grey area in betting, and anybody who posts on Twitter will be aware that as soon as you or X, whatever it's called now, as soon as you post something and you do gambling content, you suddenly get 3 people like your comment and 3 comments straight away after you think, oh, suddenly someone's wants some interaction. You look at it, all of a sudden it's someone telling you there is some fixed match somewhere in the league and he's had 55,000 on the match to be fixed. And if you want his fixed match, you have to click on this link and you can get all the data and you become a millionaire overnight if you click this fixed match. It's ruining my popularity because I think a lot of people are quite interested in the shows and the dojo, but it's not. It's these fixed matches. And I'm listening to a podcast at the moment about match fixing on the BBC podcast, and I'm listening to various different things about match fixing. And we've been involved in the industry a long time, and match fixing's come about, and the industry has changed hugely since we've gone about. Match fixing is the subject today. I mean, over the years that you've been involved, have you ever been told in advance that this is going to be a little bit dodgy? There is a possibility of match fixing on something in any sport in the 35, 40 years that you've been involved in the gambling industry?
I definitely have, not very often. And I would say that, first of all, you have to strike a difference between match fixing and inside information. I mean, I can tell you hundreds of times people have told me, yeah, this guy's got the flu, or, the main striker's going to be out, or nobody knows yet, but this is going to happen. Or in the old days, before the internet, getting weather news early was a big thing, which, doesn't really happen anymore. So that kind of thing is a completely different thing. Obviously, inside information of the sort, and also with horses, I play the horses a lot. People talk about, this one's been working badly at home. We've just found out, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes there's also there's futures betting on a race, and there'll be an injury and the horse gets pulled out and it changes the betting on the futures. That can happen. So all those things I've heard about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. But I don't really consider those to be match fixing. When it comes down to, it's going to be a fix. There's going to it's cheating, and we know the winner before the start of the contest. I think I've heard that maybe 4 times, and pretty much I think every time I heard it was snooker, and I think that's a massive thing, isn't it? It has to be. It's much more effective if you're going to be a match fixer, presumably, to deal with a one-on-one sport. So tennis, or snooker, or darts, where, literally you can just get to one of the players and say, well, you're not going to win. Or boxing, you're not going to win today. It ain't your night, son. We're going for the price on Wilson, on the waterfront there for you, Nigel, great movie. The famous scene in the back of the cab, Marlon Brando with the boxing.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Filmed in
I don't know.
Hoboken, my favourite spot in New York.
There you go. I definitely heard it with snooker a few times. Well back. I can't remember the dates now. Might have been in the 90s, I think. Terry Griffiths was playing in the Masters at Wembley, the big snooker tournament of the year, or after the World Championships. And he was playing against a fella called Peter Francisco, who was a kind of young South African guy. And I was working in a book at the time, and we were taking bets on snooker, and people wanted to bet on it being 5-2 to Terry Griffiths. Very specific. It was the first to 5, the match, and they wanted to specifically bet that the score would be 5-2. And I think the odds on that were supposed to be like about 4-1. Terry Griffiths was like a -250 favourite to win the match. So 5-1, 5-2, 5-0 were the most likely outcomes. But everybody seemed to want to bet on 5-2. And it suddenly, from being plus 400, it went to plus 250. Then they still wanted to be on. Suddenly it's plus 200. People still want to be on plus 150. Well, now it looks a bit dodgy because, first of all, we're seeing 20 times more bets than we'd normally see on trying to predict the correct score of a snooker match. And secondly, every single person wants to be on the same score, and they don't even care what the price is. I guess the real price in that situation, actually, I mean, maybe it wasn't plus 400 to start with. Maybe it was plus 250. I guess that might be about the real price, maybe plus 300, something like that. The guy was a -250 favourite. But in the end, people were betting it odds on, minus $1.25. And then betting got suspended. The governing body of snooker was asked to take a look into it. I think they went to speak to the players before the match started and said, we're going to be looking very carefully at this, and we'll be prepared to suspend people, ban you from the sport. But that didn't stop Peter Francisco. He missed a whole load of pots at key moments, and the match was won 5-2 by Terry Griffiths. I mean, it was so blatant, and it was so easy for the bookmakers to trace the bets, and they were all placed, very hard to get those kind of bets down in retail, in a betting shop environment, without people noticing. So a lot of the bets had names attached to them. Yeah, do you remember that one?
I do remember that. I mean, the famous cases that I remember, there's the one that Jimmy White played with Francisco. I think it was Silvino Francisco, wasn't it? So
I think that was Peter Francisco as well, wasn't it?
Was it Peter?
Everybody
I think
wanted
it was 10-2.
It was the
10-2,
World
10-1,
Championships,
whichever.
and they all wanted a bet. It was either 10-1 or 10-2. And obviously being first to 10, that meant that the favourite in the correct score was going to be about an 8-1 chance. So they were getting a big price for their money. Huge amounts going down. Well, I say huge amounts. People can't really get huge amounts on that, but relative to that kind of market. And not only that, it was, I think the game, as I remember, the game started on a kind of Saturday morning at like 10:30 in the morning. So the prices had only been up on the Friday night, and then first thing in the morning, people are scrambling around trying to get on. And the officials went to speak to Jimmy White and told him what had happened, and said it will look really bad for the sport if this comes off. Can you kind of either do your best to hammer him 10-0, or if that doesn't look like happening, would you consider maybe just giving him a frame or whatever to try and just avoid it happening, because it would look bad for us. That's how I heard it. And I mean, can you imagine that? Obviously, tennis is a sport where this has happened. Can you imagine in tennis them saying, "Why don't you just give him a set so that they don't land the bet?"
Well, I'm looking at the record of that match. So it was Peter Francisco against Jimmy White. It was 10-2. This was the bet that everyone wanted, and the price opened up at 9-1 and went down to 7-4, and that's when they suspended betting. And the liability that the bookmakers said they paid out was 50,000. So that was the liability, £50,000. Now, back in the year, whatever year, this was in, what year was it? I'm trying to find the year. The 90s? Was it the early 90s? I'm guessing.
Yeah.
I mean, 50,000 liability would be a big amount of money, because if you're new to snooker, I'll tell you a story. My friend of mine was a good friend of mine, was a guy called John Virgo, who's a very famous snooker player. And he won one tournament, and his only tournament win was the UK Open, the Coral UK Open. And he got through to the final. It was a ranking tournament. He won the tournament. And he had the winner's check, and he said he had his friend who travelled with him, and he had his missus or his partner at the time, and he had the winner's check, and he had a check for £1,000. That's how much he won on the tournament in 1985 or something. He had a check for £1,000, and his friend said to him, "You will never have to work again with the £1,000 check." And and now he's still doing work. He's 40 for 50. He never stopped. You'll never work again. He said he won £1,000. So 50,000 liability then is quite a considerable amount of liability, given what the wages would have been and the prize money would have been at that particular stage in the first round of a snooker. We'll come on to that in a little minute, the relevance of that.
That's a big point you've made there, though, because obviously when there's a disparity between the amount of money that the sports player can earn and the amount of money that could be won by betting, well, then there's a potential for skullduggery. Now, we get into situations where people often think that, for example, the NFL or the soccer is involves a lot of crooked matches. Well, first of all, you've got to get to a hell of a lot of players. You're going to have to pay off, maybe 10 or 20 people in order to have a big advantage. And secondly, these people are earning absolute fortunes, and it could ruin their career. So I think it's a lot harder in that. And in those sports, when there has been any problem, and if you were a cynical person that believed that there's a lot of corruption going on, I'd imagine just getting to the referee is going to be a much better idea, because these people are not paid anything like as much, and obviously there's less of them. You only need to get to one or two people to have an advantage.
I've always thought the referee or a linesman would be the first thing I would do if I'm not saying that I'm advocating cheating, but if a Russian or Albanian gambling syndicate wanted to get hold of me, the first thing I would do would approach a linesman. Not now, because obviously VAR, but in the lower leagues of England, there's no VAR. The referee can make a decision. You could get the referee on side much, much more. And if you need one goal, you can get a penalty or a free kick on the edge of the box. You're going to get a chance. That would be my first port of call if I was looking at this kind of stuff. But you talk about money there. Money's really important.
Just quickly, I've suddenly remembered the person that you could get to would be even cheaper than the referee or the linesman is the electrician. Do you remember that game I'm talking about in the football?
Yeah.
Go on, tell that.
Crystal Palace. Yeah, well, it was the Asian syndicates used to pay out on the match at half time, didn't they? So the Asian bookmakers used to pay out if whatever the result was at half time, that would be considered that the match was
if the match was abandoned. Yeah.
If the match was abandoned, so you get to half time if it's the favourites 1-0 up or the match is a draw or whatever happens, and the match is abandoned at half time. The rule was the bet would be honoured at the result at half time, and obviously these big Asian syndicates, we were led to believe, I think that's the case, were betting on various different football matches. They bet on a match between Crystal Palace, I can't remember who they were playing, but it was definitely at Selhurst Park, and they were playing the game, and they'd obviously had a bet, and then all of a sudden the lights went off, and they couldn't get an electrician, and the match got abandoned at half time because it was a Premier League game, and they got paid out on the match. And obviously the rules have changed since then, and various different things have changed since then. But money,
it's incredible, really, though, that they couldn't get an electrician to come in and sort it out for the money that's on offer.
Yeah, I mean, it baffles belief, really, when you think about it, that was the opportunity, how they did it. I mean, they must have paid the electrician to cut the wires and turn his phone off. That's probably the rules. Cut the wires, turn the phone off, and we'll speak to you again next week. But money. I've been listening to this podcast right now. It's what you said there sums it out. This guy was a non-league player. I can't remember his name now, Mohammed Sawahi or something. He was a non-league player. He played for Crystal Palace. He's on BBC. I'll find his name in a second. He played for Crystal Palace. And he went to Bromley Football Club, who were in the lower leagues of England at that time. And he reckoned that him and a teammate were offered 60,000 to throw a match. Now, I've only listened to 2 episodes of the podcast. I'm listening to them. And that's the reason I wanted to speak about this today. Now, 60,000 he was offered to throw a match at Bromley. Now, this was what he was alleged to have been offered. Now, back in those days, I reckon a player like that would have probably been on maybe £1,000 a week, tops, like Bromley, £1,000 a week. So he's on that's 13 months' money. You think about it now. You want to go and you want to get a player in the Premier League. What's the average player in the Premier League now? 125 grand a week.
More.
So you're looking at you say 200 grand a week. You're looking at 200 grand a week. It's going to cost you 6 million to get a Premier League manager, a player to be involved in. Then he's going to worry about his career, worry about anyone finding out, worrying about and really, can one player influence a match? Or
I mean, to influence the game, you probably need 4 or 5 players, and then that was the other thing you just said. Then people finding out. If you get 5 people involved, especially young lads that maybe didn't do education at a high level, they're so stupid, aren't they? They're going to talk about it and tell people, and it's going to come out.
Of course they are, but their mates will want to get involved in everything. But the other thing is where do they get the money on? And I mean, this is the thing that makes me laugh. You're talking about Bromley Football Club. This guy's got 60,000. He's 60,000. So the fixer's got to make at least 5 times that to make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Now, I worked in the Asian markets in 1997, and the Asian markets aren't silly. They're very sophisticated. There is a pyramid system where you get on and you go down and you take a percentage off however high up. I'm guessing that these guys bet into the top market, but they still don't want to. If they think that you're being corrupt on them, the consequences aren't a lot more serious to you as the better, rather than you would be betting in the UK bookmaker in terms of they wouldn't be very happy in that. It's not like it's an open market where you can just go in and have 60,000 quid on a guy to be booked in the 52nd minute or a wide in the, it's got to be factored in. And I just look at these figures sometimes, and I look at from a different side of opinion, looking at from the bookmaking market in the US and looking from the bookmaking market in the UK, they are on the ball completely. So when this money does filter into the system, which inevitably it does, or whenever money comes, you're going to get away with it once for a small stake, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 quid on a guy to be booked, or a match to be lower level football, maybe 10 grand on the money line, whatever. Second time, if you bet that one, it's 2-0 and the line goes from plus 120 to minus 120. The next bet you have is half, and the third bet you're finished. So where does this dodgy money go that alleged these millions of pounds are being bet? Where does it go? Where does it filter through the system? I understand in the cricket sphere where they pay a Pakistani or an Indian or a professional cricket player, whatever they come from, to throw a wide in a particular over. That costs a lot of money. They can bet on a wide they can get 50 grand on that, 60 grand at maybe even money or plus 2-1, whatever they want. I don't know how the price would be because I'm not a cricket expert, but I just don't get the volumes that have been thrown around. I don't believe. I genuinely don't believe.
No. I mean, I think the thing is the grey market, isn't it? That there's a lot of offshore activity in Dubai, to an extent in South America, and to an extent in Asia generally, whereby people are being offered the opportunity to bet 5 times the screen price. 5 times the maximum that you can get on the screen, or they have they look at the exchanges and say, well, you can have 10 times whatever's available on the exchange and you pay commission on it. There are bookmakers doing that around the world, and that money stays out of the system and is never really seen or heard about. And that's a very, very kind of grey market.
Can I just ask you a question there? Sorry, Neil, can I just ask you a question there?
Yeah.
The problem is these markets that we're talking about Premier League football players getting booked. We're talking about, that's the latest one is the West Ham player, Paquetá, who's had 3 matches being booked. You go onto the exchange markets, you're talking about a guy who's getting there's $50 if you're lucky. If you're doing 10 times the market, you get where are they buying this guy? He's going to get booked.
The spot fixing stuff. The spot fixing stuff, in the cricket to be a wide or the next ball to be a no ball or whatever. I don't really get that anymore because I don't think there's any liquidity in that, and nobody's really interested in taking those bets. From strangers suddenly all wanting to bet the same thing. Also the same with the booking stuff. But in terms of the kind of the lower league football match, one team to beat the other in the 1-2x market or the Asian handicap, I think they can use companies around the world. But I think you're right. Of course, follow the money is always the answer in these things, isn't it? If you want to find out what's going on, just look at the money. Sometimes when there's a tennis game, and there's been tennis games over the years, particularly on the smaller tour, where people are continuing to play and running. A guy might open, I don't know, -$3, loses the first set, and the price is unchanged, and people are still piling on him at -$3. Well, obviously that must be, that must be crooked. But there's always a fingerprint to the money. You can see where the money's coming from. And that can be traced back to the players normally, and I think it's a lot harder these days. I think maybe 10 years ago,
much
the market was less sophisticated and people didn't care about it as much. Also, the sports themselves have wised up a little bit. I mean, in the UK, for example, every sport signs a contract with the gambling industry, and basically the gambling if the what do you call it, the governing body of the sport suspects there's something wrong, if you're the head of the WPBSA, the World Professional Billiards and Snooker Association, and you think there's been a dodgy snooker match, you can contact all the gambling companies and say, can you give me a list of all the people that had a bet on this? Maybe you might say all the people that had more than $50 on it or something like that. You don't necessarily care about people that had £2 on it. and then you can sort of trace those people, and you've got some kind of, now you can, I mean, in horse racing, they have the system of warning off. So in a situation that I spoke of before, where there's there's future odds on, I don't know, say the Kentucky Derby, and then it's announced that the favourite's broken down in training and isn't going to run, we suddenly notice that the price of the favourite went from plus 110 to plus 500 or something like that in the hour before the announcement. They can look and see who did those bets, and in certain circumstances in the UK, those people will be warned off. They're no longer permitted to attend horse race meets. They're no longer permitted to own horses. Now you might say, well, what kind of sanction is that? And if they're a licensed individual, a jockey or a trainer, they can have their license removed. Now, some people don't think of that as much of a sanction. So, whoopee-doo, big deal. I'm not allowed to own horses anymore. What do I care? But, there's also the inherent publicity that goes with that. People that have been warned off, you can usually find details of the case in the media, and it might affect the rest of their life in some way. I think that's a bit of a deterrent, and I think that's something that's come in a lot more in all sports in the last few years.
Yeah, and that's definitely. And also, if you're found guilty of skullduggery or making profit from anything that's criminal in betting, you can be charged as well, can't you?
Yeah. So the 2005 Gambling Act, which took so long to sort out, it actually didn't become law until 2007. It established cheating in gambling as a criminal offence in the UK. The slight problem is that what the hell is cheating in gambling? I mean, in that situation I talked about earlier, where somebody might ring up and say, we've heard that the centre forward's not going to play today because he's got the flu or something like that. Is that cheating if I know that and nobody else knows that? If I hear that a horse has worked badly on the Wednesday and it's going to still run on the Saturday, but we don't really think it's going to win, is that cheating if I'm the owner and I know that and nobody else knows it? It's quite tricky, isn't it, to establish what is cheating and what is inside information. In the time since the 2005 Gambling Act came in, only one person has been convicted of cheating in gambling, and that was a fella who went to the press. He was all over the newspapers about 10 years ago, saying that he was the Mr. Big of fixing dog racing in the UK, and that he could inject dogs, greyhounds, and stop them from winning, and he'd made millions from it. This was his claim. I don't know why he thought going to the newspaper to boast about that was a good idea. He actually went to prison, but he's literally the only person that's been convicted. Now we had a general election in the UK earlier in the year, and some MPs were suspected of betting on the date of the election when they were in the meeting when Rishi Sunak told them what the date of the election was. Now, the Gambling Commission did an investigation into that and found that there was no real case to answer, or I don't know whether that was the exact wording they used, but presumably they decided for some reason or another that it wasn't worth pursuing. Well, I mean, obviously we can find out the minutes of that meeting exist. We know who was in attendance at that meeting, and we know who had the bets on the date of the election. If you really wanted to stamp out cheating in gambling, surely some of those people should have been prosecuted, but maybe that was a political decision.
Yeah, I mean, there is that to me is a very, 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 very grey area. But I'm very, very cynical of these numbers. These matchy things. I mean, this stuff you get, this scamming you get when these people post this stuff. I mean, that's just totally and utterly.
Well, that's obviously nonsense. That's just an online scam. I mean,
yeah. It's the lower level you go, the lower you go down, where the money isn't there. There is ripe, and that's the risk you take where you play. If you look at some of these tennis challenger events, you go further and further down where there's no money. There is a risk to skullduggery. The higher you go, I'm convinced that the Premier League and major soccer leagues in this world are probably the straightest they've ever been with.
But in terms of my own betting, if I'm betting on the NFL or I'm betting on Premier League soccer or top soccer, wherever it is in the world, I don't even think about it. It's not even a factor. I don't think I've ever watched a
No.
game and thought, "Oh my God, that looked a bit crooked. Like that looks like that
You would have
guy's
watched
been
horse race.
paid
You would
off."
have watched horse racing many a times. You would have watched horse racing many a times, though, and saw a jockey give a ride to a horse and question that many
Horse
times.
racing, 100%. I've felt it at different
Yes.
times, and it's almost always when a betting pattern is immediately followed by running one way or the other. I see a horse drift in the betting. Suddenly it's held up in the rear of the field when it's previously been a front runner, and it's, basically never lifted a leg. I definitely think they knew that it was going to run like that, and the market knew somehow, and the money's filtered in. But that's kind of, to me, that's kind of part of horse racing, and you can't really do much about that. Obviously the trainer, the jockey, the owner are always going to know more about the tactics than the general public are going to know. And the tactics can make a huge difference to, the outcome of the race. It doesn't really bother me because I just feel like, sometimes I'm the victim of it and sometimes I benefit from it. So I don't really care too much about that. In terms of, when there's a sort of a lower thing, I mean, you bet a lot on tennis, don't you? If you see one of those where you kind of fancy somebody at even money, and then the next time you look, they're plus 125, plus 150, plus 175, plus 200, and the money's just pouring on the other person. How much of your brain is thinking, well, I've just misread the form of these two players, I've maybe misanalyzed the game, or how much are you thinking something's going on here, this is rotten?
Well, I never think it's rotten. Especially if it's at the ATP Tour, I wouldn't think it's rotten. If it's a challenger event, I think it's completely rotten. It would stink the place out. But on an ATP Tour event, I just think it's an injury. I just think there's someone knows something more. The guy's got an injury. These guys play an awful lot of tennis. They're exhausted. We saw it yesterday. The Tour Championships, the ATP Tour World, the biggest event, the biggest money in the tournament. It's 5 million for the winners, or £1 million a game. And Carlos Alcaraz got beat 6-1, 7-5 against Casper Ruud because he had a fever. Now, we saw it yesterday.
And was there a money effect? Did the market move beforehand?
A little bit, not massively, but there was a huge effect after the first set when Ruud won the first set 6-1. Usually the market would be thinking, well, we want to get with Alcaraz, he's going to come back. But he didn't have the ability to come back because he clearly wasn't well.
And if you'd have got the phone call
in the press conference,
if you'd have got the phone call beforehand to say, Alcaraz is not very well today and you should take the other guy, would you have thought that you're cheating?
Not at all. Not at all. I thought I would have got better info. I've done my job better than the odds compiler. The odds compiler for that sport should be having people out there. He should be ringing up. He should be searching social media to find the information that I've got. I wouldn't think anything. If I was told that Alcaraz was going to lose the second set 6-3, I wouldn't bet it.
Let me tell you a story about a snooker one. I've got a good story.
I've got one for you about darts after, but I'll tell you one after your snooker, I'll tell you darts one.
So my friend the Camel, this was a long time ago. We were teenagers at the time. We used to go to the Dogs, and we liked to go to the Dogs. And
I think I know where this
we
is
were not
going.
huge. We were not huge punters at the Dogs. We used to bet, in £5, £10. Sometimes £2, and if we really fancied a dog, maybe we'd have £20. Or it was a social thing. We enjoyed going to the Dogs. We wanted to win, but it certainly wasn't a way that we were going to get rich. And there was one of the people who was. There were a few bookies at the Dogs, and one of the bookies there had most of the bookies there were just part time. That was just a thing that they did. 3 nights a week, and they had regular lives and jobs the rest of the time. So anyway, the Camel gets a call one time from some guy that he knows to say there's a snooker match happening at the weekend, and one of the players has just done his leg in playing football, and he's gonna be all kind of strapped up, and he can barely walk. But he needs to win this game for the ranking points. and he's going to give it his best. But it's a pick'em game, and they had a heavy juice on it. They were minus $1.20 both players. It was the early rounds of a snooker tournament. Also, it was being played on Easter weekend. So you had to get your bet on the Friday because in those days the shops used to close on the Saturday and the Sunday. And the game was being played on the Sunday. So this guy said, well, we've only got today to get the money on, and we need to get as much as we can on. Can you get some on? He asked the camel. So he sent over some money to the camel, and he said, do what you can do. So the camel goes into a shop in West London, and he writes out the slip, £1,200, 5 to 6, on this fella to win. Obviously not the guy with his leg strapped up. And takes it up to the counter, and lo and behold, the fella at the counter is the bookie from Reading Dogs. He's also the manager of this betting shop. That's his regular day job. And he's used to the camel betting £2, £5. Now the camel wants to bet £1,200 on a snooker game. And the fella he doesn't know what the hell's going on. He said to the camel, can I... I'll just have to call up and see if that's okay. So he calls up the head office and says, I've got a regular customer. I know the man well. He'd like to have £1,200 on this snooker match. Is that okay? And they said, well, what do you think about him? He said, well, he's just a very normal guy. I've known him a while. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, presumably he wanted to help the camel to get his bet on. So anyway, they laid him the bet, 1,200 at 5 to 6. And now the guy comes off the phone. He says, what the hell is going on here? He said, when you're at the Dogs, you bet £2, £5, £10. Suddenly you're coming in my shop. I've never seen you in the shop before. You want £1,200 on the snooker. What's going on? He said, Dogs is just recreational for me. Snooker's really my main game.
Now did the guy get
fella
off?
Came out. He had a plaster cast on his leg when he came out to play. Pommeled round the table with a crutch.
Unfortunately, it wasn't his hand. It should have been his hand for a snooker player. It would have been a bit his hand. I tell you two very, very quick stories. I want to ask you one thing before we wrap up on the match fix as well. Before we go, but I just want to tell you two very funny stories. I used to work for a bookmaker called Stan James many years ago. If many people remember, I used to do the PR for Stan James, and we used to sponsor the Stan James World Match Play Darts Championship up at Blackpool every year. It was a great Beano, and all the players, you say it was the best tournament, and behind the stage, all the players used to come in and have a drink with us and have a laugh with us. And the session used to start at 11 o'clock in the morning or 12 o'clock in the morning, and then it would run through all the way through till 12 o'clock at night. So you can imagine the state of what everyone was in by the end of the day, the fans and everybody. And it was in the early days, and there was, I'm not going to mention the name, but there was a darts player who came in, and he was playing a match, his first round match. And he was an underdog. He would have been about 5 to 4, but the other guy was about 4 to 7. Well, someone said, "Oh, don't go near him. He's had a row with his missus or something. He's not very happy." He travelled up from London. He said he's not in a good mood. He's had a row with his missus and everything like that. And then I went, "Okay, no problem." Next minute, it was a free bar at the back, so you could just go and help yourself. And like my job was to make sure everyone's all right. And then I just see this guy, and he had a pint, and in the pint, he was just drinking pints of white wine, like literally pints of white wine. So, like, he was knocking this pint of white wine down, and I'm looking at him thinking, God, all right, are you all right, mate? He said, yeah, I'm fine. And he's having another pint of white wine. Then he went out and he come back. Then we had about 4 bottles of white wine in the fridge. Like, no one had it. Like, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, no one had any white wine. So then I had to go and get some more white wine. So I had to get more white wine, another 4 bottles. Anyway, another 4 bottles. Neil, there was no white wine left. I couldn't get any white wine. He was just sitting there, like, all in a sulk on his phone. And so I said to someone, I said, like, is he all right? He said, he's all right. He'll be fine. I said, well, when is he playing? He said, in about an hour and a half. I went, what? He said, he's playing in about an hour and a half, right? He went on stage at the World Match Play. He got beat 10-0, and he averaged the lowest ever score at the time live on TV. I think he averaged about 62, 63, which was the lowest ever average. And I was sitting watching this guy, and I didn't bet because I was probably like not really into my gambling. And I thought, oh, this opportunity will happen again next week, or happen again in the week after. I never took advantage of it, but it never ever happened. It never ever happened. And this guy just done, honestly, he must have done 15 pints of white wine And he went out and played live on television, got beat 10-0 and averaged about 61, 62. Anyway, before we go, we could tell stories all along. What everyone got to do before we just wrap off one more? What do people got to do on this if they want to follow us?
First of all, assuming that you're enjoying these podcasts, you need to show that by pressing like. Just go and press the like button. Doesn't cost you anything to do that. And the more likes we get, the more people get to find out. The algorithm promotes this stuff to other people. Even better than that is if you press the other button, subscribe. But that does sound a bit horrible, doesn't it? Subscribe. It doesn't mean we want your bank account details. We won't be sending you any fixed soccer matches. It just means that you'll get to see when the next one of these comes out. Sometimes we do them on Monday, sometimes on Tuesday, and you'll get, if you hit the alarm bell, you'll get an alarm bell when it comes out. But so do join us by pressing the subscribe button. It's good to see the number of subscribes going up, but we'd like it to go up some more, and we'd like the number of likes to go up a lot more. So if you can do that, that'll be good.
I think someone rang the bell a minute ago, and that's a subscribe button. I don't know what that was. I don't know if it was your front door or producer John's. There was a ring there.
A bit late.
As a postman, he always rings twice. He always knocks twice, the postman. Just one thing we want to just, obviously, Neil's trapped here. We also have a subscribe now for the Betting Weekly newsletter, bettingweeklystudios.com. Head across there, subscribe. Again, it's not a nice word. All you have to do is put your email address and we'll send you some stuff there. We've got 100% winning record on the picks there from the team. Exclusive volume 2 is out now, so make sure you subscribe to the newsletter. bettingweeklystudios.com.
Can I quickly promote my social media, because I'm going to give a try to this Blue Sky thing that everyone's doing.
Of course you can.
So I've started an account on Blue Sky. So if you follow me on Twitter and you want more of the same on Blue Sky, all that nonsense you get on Twitter, it's Neil Channing lowercase bluesky.social or whatever the hell the rest of it is. But just, very simple.
I'll have to look at that. What? Never heard of Blue Sky? What's Blue Sky?
It's like a new version of Twitter, but if you don't really like Elon Musk, but you like doing Twitter.
Okay, I'll have to check it out. Finally, Neil, this is the last thing we're going to talk about. Me and you being involved in the spread betting industry from the start. That's how we met. That's how we mentioned our past on this podcast before. Very famous spread betting story that if you look at any 90s footballer, he always tells you he got involved in this, which I cannot listen to. I cannot believe it. I just don't get it. And everyone comments to me, oh, do you remember that everyone had it off on... It is like everyone talks about it as though everyone in the world, every player is in the world and every bookmaker done their money on the time of the first corner. Now, this was a market that was set up by one of our rivals. We worked for a company called IG Index. Sporting Index were the company that done it. And I think it went on for a various amount of time before anyone realised what happened. And there was one match where they kicked off and the ball went into touch and people allegedly made a huge amount of money. But every autobiography, every 90s football player says they were involved in it and they done it. Complete and utter rubbish. Absolute rubbish. Put the record straight on that market for me, because it happened. I think it happened once. People realised it was that, and then they stopped the market.
Yeah. They used to do time of first throw in, didn't they? And I think wasn't it the Wimbledon?
That was it. Sorry, time of the first throw, not the corner.
Yeah. I think it was the Wimbledon players. But honestly, on those kind of markets, you would take about 30 bets top whack, and most of the bets were like tiny. And it was always from kind of the same people that would bet on every game. So it would stand out like a sore thumb if a whole bunch of people went one way on it and wanted a bet bigger. I can imagine, I can see a possibility that they want a small amount on one game doing it. But people were talking about it. I remember that particular game. People were talking about it the next day. It never happened again. And the amount, the amounts would have been minuscule.
Yeah, I got it confused. It was time of the first throw on, and basically the market ran for about 6 or 7 matches until this one particular match where I think it was Wimbledon, and they got kicked off and they kicked the ball into touch straight away, which meant if you sold the bet, wherever the second it was under what the price was supposed to be, you would have made. Literally after that happened, then they realised they were being had. I think they pulled the market instantly, and nobody ever made any money on it again. But all you ever hear it's like these Chinese whispers, and I do think there's a lot of Chinese whispers in these match fixing. Oh yeah, we were involved in that. We were involved in that. Oh, I could throw that match for 20 grand. I could throw that match for 100 grand. And I do think we've got to be very, very careful what we have. We have got the best intelligence system in the world. The bookmaking intelligence system is phenomenal. we have a podcast here that every comment on the bottom says that people can't get £100 on a bet. So how the hell are match fixers getting £10,000 and £20,000 continuously on lower league football buying players? And how on earth are they betting players to get cards? It's crazy.
I would also say that if you're having a bad run and you've lost over the weekend or whatever, and you're trying to blame it on it's all rigged, the referees are against me, the players are on the take, I think sometimes it's easy to deflect from having a look and saying, did I really have the best bets? Did I get a little bit out of control at one stage? Was I chasing my losses a little bit? Sometimes you got to just have a bit of self-reflection about your gambling and have a little look at how you're doing. And it's very easy to try and blame other people. And I think, I honestly, I don't really worry about match fixing. It's not a thing I think that much about.
No, nothing at all. Lower levels, definitely. You know, you're going to take your risks. It's like anything in life. If you go down to lower levels or into areas of that you don't want to get involved in, then you're going to come across some sort of risk around that. But top level football and across the country, top levels, £100,000 first round exit at Wimbledon. I mean, you're not front of US Open paying record figures as well, record attendances. When you're betting on these sports, they are 99.9% straight. And if you're having a bad run, it's yours. There are small circumstances, but really,
last thing I'll say
are made up.
If we title up this video and mention the word fixed football matches, we'll get the most responses we've ever got on social media.
Yeah, or we get everyone blocking us. It's one or the other. It's you might as well just go for it. It's like the Chris McCausland. He can win it or he can be out week one. That's what we've got to do. And that's it for this week. Thank you very much, Neil, for your time. I know you're a busy man. You've got a lot to do as well. Load of stuff coming your way here on Betting Weekly Studios. We have the football on international break at the moment. Betting Weekly live every single day. One of the handicapping team will be on Monday to Friday, giving you the best bets for that day. And also the big market movers from Bet Rivers headquarters. We also have the tennis coming to an end on Betting Weekly Game Bet Match. And make sure you download this podcast, Betting Weekly Dojo, wherever you get your podcast from. Please subscribe, as Neil said. Do join us. And please subscribe to the Betting Weekly Studios newsletter, which you can get on bettingweeklystudios.com. Thanks very much, Neil. Take care. All the very best. And they'll be back next week and we'll be moaning about those bets and saying they must have been crooked. Take care.